A lot of people ask me what scares me or where I get the inspiration for the stories that I write. 9 times out of 10, I'll tell people at these panels where I get asked these questions that I had terrible night terrors as a kid, which I guess in a sense is true, but there's more to the story. You see, there was something else involved in the night terrors that I rarely ever share with anyone, mostly because I don't want to take up the rest of the panel by telling everyone this story, and I had night terrors as a kid is a lot quicker and easier to say. The house I moved into when I was 7 years old was a house tucked away in rural Texas on a beautiful lake. My family moved there because it was the house next to my grandparents' house, and they had just been in a terrible car accident, needing my mom to stay close by to take care of my grandmother. She eventually passed away, leaving only my grandfather living in a large house next door to ours. My grandfather will have his own video later on, connected to the SLENDERMAN story, but right now let's focus on the story at hand. So, for lack of a better word, I'd say my house is haunted. Not haunted in the typical sense of ghosts or spirits, but there definitely was a presence in my house. In particular, my room. I never really noticed its presence or felt its effects until I was 9 or 10 years old. That's when I was starting to get bullied a lot, and started dealing with not having any friends and being totally isolated. The house I lived in was in a retirement-type community, so there weren't many other kids around, and I was homeschooled, so I never got the chance to interact with other kids my age in a school setting either. Most of my life was spent inside of my room, because the few kids I would interact with at the various churches my family attended would ostracize me, and even in the youth groups I'd always be left out or made to feel like the weird kid who didn't belong there. This started taking a toll on me at a young age, and I'd come to spend most, if not all, of my preteen and young teen years extremely depressed and feeling completely alone. I theorized that all these dark and lonely feelings of anger and despair are probably what made my room in particular the target of this dark presence. The house I lived in was a one-story house with windows everywhere. It might as well have been a fish tank. Even the front door was a huge glass front door with an engraved swan on it. No matter where you went in my house, someone could see you from the outside. That, in and of itself, is unsettling. The living room is a huge area with a 20 to 30 foot high vaulted ceiling. One side of the living room leads to my kitchen and my parents' bedroom. But on the other side is a small hallway that leads off to my room, my sister's room, and a bathroom at the end of the hall. At the very beginning, right before these dark feelings were starting to come into my life, I started to feel uncomfortable every night when going anywhere in the house but my own room. Even leaving my room to go to the bathroom, I couldn't do. Something in the living room area or right outside the front door filled me with this deep, dark terror. It would permeate into my room, and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I'd have to keep all the lights on and just sit in my room with my door closed. This was before I was anywhere near having a cell phone, so I tried to scream for my parents, but since they were on the other side of the house, they would never hear me. Occasionally, my sister in the room over would hear me screaming or banging on the walls and come over. My sister and I weren't particularly close, as she's 7 years older than I was and was in another stage in her life. But just having contact with someone else was enough to make the terror go away. At that point, I started begging almost every night to sleep in one of their rooms with them. This went on for years. I spent a majority of those years either not sleeping or sleeping on my sister or parents' floors. As years went on and more bad things kept happening to me, I started to feel it moving into my room. This made it even worse. I got to the point where I couldn't sleep in my room at all. There was this one corner of the room, across from where my bed was, that I could always feel a presence in. It was this thick, dark, sick feeling of terror, like a weight crushing on my chest. It would make my blood feel like ice, and it would get really hard to breathe. But there was never anything there, and no one but me was experiencing anything like it in the house. I couldn't ever explain what I was scared of to my family, so that only made things more difficult. I once tried to explain to my mom a few years later that I could feel something in my room with me, and I'm pretty sure at one point I ended up asking her if we could get a priest to bless my room. I think she thought I was just imagining things or that I was acting out for attention or something, because I remember getting no response even when I brought up the dark presence in my room, which is a little strange because my family was very religious. My mom wouldn't even let me play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or games like Age of Mythology because she thought it might bring demons into the house. So I thought for sure the idea of a demon or something like it being in the house would be enough to get their attention. Nope. The first and only time that another person acknowledged the presence was one of my few friends growing up. She was a girl who did taekwondo with me, and one night she spent the night at my house. She was a country girl through and through, and had made it obvious she wasn't into anime or any other of the weird stuff that I was into. We both did taekwondo, we got along, and that was about the end of our similarities. Which is also why I didn't mention any of this weird "my house is haunted" stuff to her at any point prior in our friendship. I didn't need any more of a reason for people to label me the weird kid. I was doing a fine job of that myself. So the night that she spent at my house, I hadn't ever mentioned anything about the night terrors, as I'd start to call them, or about the thing that haunted my room. I also theorized that the thing haunting my room wouldn't come around if someone else was in the room, because if it made me feel more isolated and made me sound crazy to other people, the stronger the despair that I would feel. My theory is that it fed off of the despair and the darkness inside of me that was growing due to my circumstances and my loneliness. But there are many forms of loneliness. The kind of loneliness that you feel when you're bullied and shunned by your fellow kids, and the kind you feel when something is haunting your room but no one believes you because nothing is happening to them and you have no evidence except for your own word. On the night that she stayed with me, we joked around and hung out in my room until about 10 p.m. At the time, I was probably 12 or 13 and she was probably 14 or 15. We both laid down on the floor on the opposite side of the room from the corner that I could always feel the darkness coming from. I turned off the lights and, for some reason, we both ended up laying with our backs facing that corner, with me being the furthest away from the corner. After about 10 minutes of laying there, that sinking, sick, dark feeling hits me, and I know that presence is there. I start to get the cold sweat and pressure on my chest, and I'm absolutely filled with dread. That had never happened to me. I'd never had it appear when someone else was with me. Now I had the internal struggle of trying to decide to turn on the lights and explain to my friend that I'm weirder than she thought because I think there's a demon in my room. Or just spending the whole night on the floor in absolute terror. Minutes passed that felt like an eternity in terrified silence. When suddenly, from behind me, I hear my friend shakily whisper, asking me if I could feel it too.